Next on our agenda, we're going to have a review of the Austin Local Solar Advisory Committee recommendations for optimizing the use of the city's local solar resource.
Council members, my name is Michael Kuhn. I'm with Imagine Solar, and I served on the Local Solar Advisory Committee. And I just have a couple of points to make. We're looking forward to seeing the results of the Value Solar study. I actually served on the consulting team that did the original Value Solar study. And some of the interesting results of being able to work on that project are that I actually learned that what you get from Value Solar studies is highly dependent upon four things. The framework that you're using. Are you looking at the benefit to a utility? Or are you looking at a benefit from the community as well as the utility? That's important. Also, what values you choose to quantify. We had a subset of values that we quantified in the original report, but there were others that our client, Austin Energy, chose not to have us, further quantify and have that as part of the report. The third is really your choice of methodologies. There are different analytical approaches to things such as capacity value. And it turns out, in addition to widely used approaches by the solar industry throughout the country, there's also the ERCOT approach. And so you have to kind of dive into, which methodology we're actually going to use here. And the fourth is really your choice of assumptions and data. And, one of the most important sources of data is what do you expect the price of natural gas to be going forward into 30 years? Because basically what the Value Solar approaches do is equate or compare a solar asset to a natural gas turbine. And so to actually do that well, you have to have some kind of assumption, some kind of data on what you expect. And this is actually very difficult. It's difficult to actually get projections, even from the natural gas price consultants, beyond 10 years.
Thank you. Can I just ask, I'm curious, you said that one of the four elements is the values that you choose to quantify. Can you give us examples of ones that have been quantified and the ones that were left off?
Well,
the current value of solar?
Yeah, there's the value of the energy that's in. There's the value of the capacity factor that's in. There's the value of being able to delay, belt out of distribution because you can kind of infill, with capacity to generate electricity. Some of the ones that may be left out are the value of merging solar technology with other technologies. So system-level solutions like distributed storage as well as distributed generation via photovoltaics. And I actually just saw this week that the U.S. Senate actually has passed a bill to create incentives for distributed storage. This is a game changer. If this actually makes it to the president's desk and he approves it, then suddenly it's a brand new game. Because the value of your solar assets goes up if you're actually able to make solar energy something that you can store, so it's no longer intermittent, and the stored energy can be used at night.
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask one follow-up question about the value of solar? I'm trying to figure out just conceptually how the principles you've articulated with respect to the value of solar relate to the goal we've talked about of gradually ramping down rebates over time and fostering an industry that is less dependent on city support. I can see how there might be some tension between establishing a value of solar and adding additional values. I can think of other values that we would also want to add into the value of solar. And I can imagine that being at a fairly high level and perhaps even a constant or even increasing level as we see the cost continuing to rise for other fuels. how do you reconcile that with the general goal of reducing rebates over time?
Well, you have kind of parallel systems going on right now where you have to decide, we have to decide, how much to give credit to a solar asset. And so this is basically talking about net metering. Do we value a kilowatt hour at the full retail rate? Do we value it at the value solar rate? And so that's always going to continue. All right. But in addition to that, right now we also have rebates for residential, and we've got the performance-based incentives for commercial. And so, the use of those rebates and performance-based incentives is because we're trying to incentivize the market to put in place more solar, right? So as costs come down, those incentives can decline, and they will. But you still have to have, give these, the solar asset owner some value for the kilowatt hours they're putting into the system that is of use for the utility and the rest of the community, right? So that's kind of the difference there.
Okay. I mean it's an excellent question. It's something we spent a lot of time talking about at the LSAC. And what my point of view was, and I think the committee in general's point of view was, that Austin Energy, by developing a value of solar rate that is fundamentally based on market values and other quantifiable values, is the first utility, and it was recognized nationally as the first utility for really providing solar owners with what I would call a fair payment for their resource. And because of that, that's enabled them and will further enable them to reduce rebates over time. So we saw, I think, the value of solar rate as providing a window of opportunity to further reduce the rebates and just compensate customers for the actual values they're providing to the utility. And if I could just comment real briefly, Councilmember Morrison, on your question, this gets a little bit outside of the constraints, and I think speaks to what Michael was talking about, of the way that Austin Energy approached the value of solar question. But one of the things we tried to do in the committee, and I worked closely with Jose Becerro from the Chamber on this, was to quantify the economic development benefits as much as possible. And that was a very rigorous process. And I'm more than happy to talk about that in depth with Austin Energy or council members if you're interested. But basically what we found was the net present value of following our plan through 2020 is $124 million in wages, just purely in wages for Austin, employees of companies that are based in Austin and doing installations in Austin. $285 million in economic output. And these are numbers that obviously the utility doesn't receive the benefit from that, but the community does. And then the other thing I would add to that, it's a much smaller benefit, but from my point of view, as important, is $15 million in environmental benefits. And again, I'd be happy to walk through those numbers in more detail.